Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the April 3rd, 2023 Community Recovery Fund Advisory Committee meeting. We are in order. We have 6 of our 7 members currently, so that's quorum. What I don't have in here is changes to the agenda. I want to bring up this idea. We don't have to decide yet at this moment. Since the events of the last week came to light that there's now more money available, a number of applicants have contacted me and I think the whole legislature. And I reported back to them, I said, I personally don't think there should be lobbying of the legislature, that we have the applications and that we will make decisions based on those. But I wanted to be careful as I was saying that I was speaking for myself, because we as a committee or legislature haven't decided that. So the only thing that I would consider adding to the agenda today is a motion making that official. And I don't know how people feel about that. Should we add it to the, yes, Deborah.
Yeah, well, I'm in support of your position. I think that we've struggled with this throughout the process. It's a lot like when we do a search for adding a person to staff. We are cautioned constantly by HR, ask everyone the same questions, give everyone the same opportunity to present themselves. And I think that that's probably the fairest process. So I agree with you.
Other thoughts about that?
I agree with you and Deborah on that.
Randy?
I agree, but we can't stop people from doing it, right? I mean, if they
We
send
can't
an email,
enforce it.
right? Yeah.
But that way we can reply, we have voted to request.
Okay with that.
Okay, then how about, will somebody give me a motion that says this committee is asking applicants not to lobby the committee and let us decide on the merits of applications?
I'd make that motion.
Deborah makes it. Thank you. Is there a second? Randy, thank you. Other discussion? Mike?
No, I mean, people have a right to
They do.
petition government. So,
Yeah.
and I get what we're trying to do, but that's kind of like a bedrock thing. I don't.
I mean, perhaps we should couch it in terms of we decline to consider any additional information beyond. That leaves it open to them to lobby or attempt to lobby, but we're just not going to be considering that information.
So does that mean we're not taking any more of what we have?
What we have is what we got.
That is a decision we'll be making. There's an assumption on that. Veronica?
Yeah, thanks. I apologize for missing the beginning of the discussion. So correct me if this was covered, but for second wind, we considered I'm not saying we should like take it all as an example, but one thing that we voted to consider was a replacement application for like a significant, like because of a change in the situation.
The legislature did that. We as a committee rejected it.
I remember. Okay, well, maybe that's the answer, that this committee doesn't want to do things like that. Even if we decide to not like accept any sort of like updated info, can we maybe acknowledge that I imagine some applicants might have had like a situation change that would be like, oh, if we were applying for the same exact project now, it would be different. And that's probably like frustrating to not be able to communicate that to us, which maybe is fine. I think we should at least acknowledge that. I already got one email along those lines.
The reason I like the word lobby is we can ask anybody anything we want. They can give us information, but that's different than lobbying, in my opinion. Can you repeat what the wording we ended up on? Or
There was a suggestion that we decline to consider additional information beyond what's in the record in the applications.
Randy?
My only question that is if we go through our list, we say, well, you know, these are the 5 or 6 that we want to do something, we may request additional information from them, right? Or, you know, what if their minimum was X and we don't want to, what would the impact of a lesser minimum be or something like that? Is that allowed?
We're asking them for the information.
Okay, right.
In my opinion, that's allowed.
Okay.
Especially with respect to how much we want to allocate.
So which wording are we leaning towards?
So, sorry, the wordings that Deborah and Dan put out seem not the same at all then. It's, we decline to consider additional information, and we aren't going to allow people to lobby, or I don't remember your wording.
That's close enough. Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I just want to name. Those are very different.
Well, I would be concerned that if, I guess, the point that Mike brought up, that people have a right to communicate to their elected representatives, I guess I would be concerned if we passed something that said, no, you're not allowed to
Say
communicate.
not, we request that no lobbying, yeah.
Well-
Because of course we can't stop someone from contacting us.
I like the way she phrased it.
But we're not going to accept any new information.
I mean, if that's what we decide to do. Otherwise, I would say then people should be allowed to contact us, and we can either consider it or not consider it.
So I'll remind everyone that in the origins, not that this matters, but 2 years ago when we were having the discussions about how to form this, there was a very strong opinion that we don't want the organizations who are really good at lobbying, I'm putting that in quotes, to have an advantage over those organizations that are kind of new to the game and maybe don't know, exactly how to influence the legislators. That was one of the original concerns. Maybe that's not a concern anymore, but that's kind of part of where I'm coming from. Deborah.
And apropos of that, Dan, I think that what played out is that there were a few organizations and causes for which a large number of people turned out and were heard. And I don't know that that's necessarily what we should consider when we're deciding how to distribute this money. Whose cause is popular? Not so much. We're trying to figure out whose need is something we ought to address.
Randy.
We say something like, we may choose not to consider unsolicited information or something like that. Unsolicited being the,
I'd be comfortable with that language. Mike, does that meet your test?
Can you read it like through? Or
Go ahead, Randy.
say that again.
If you can, or I don't know if Katrina caught it yet or
It's a
not.
modification of Deborah's comment that we may choose to, we may not consider unsolicited additional information. May not, no.
Beyond what's in the original application.
That works.
That's-
Does that work for everybody? You want to read it back to us one more time if you have it?
Okay, this is Deborah's motion. She moved that the committee may choose not to consider unsolicited information besides what is already available in the application.
I think we've watered that down pretty.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. Is everyone okay with that
Some pump.
amendment? Okay, in that case, we're going to have a vote. Everybody's ready for a vote? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, I just feel a little more comfortable. Now it's not just me saying it, it's what we actually voted on. All right. That moves us into minutes approval. Somebody want to move the minutes? Travis, thank you. Deborah, seconds, thank you. Any suggested edits? I have one. Mine is on packet page 4, right at the top, where it says contracting update. It talks about waivers, but it doesn't really define what a waiver is, and I just thought for the record, it would be good to add a quick definition, so this was my suggestion, adding the following sentence. The waivers allow awardees to receive the funds upfront rather than as a reimbursement.
Wait, what page?
Packet page 4, right at the very top where it says contracting update.
Oh, yeah,
There's
okay.
2 sentences there already, and I would add a third sentence. Shall I read it again?
No, I just needed to know where it went.
No problems. How do people feel about that? Is that going to work for everybody? Yeah?
It's friendly.
Friendly amendment? I'll make it a formal amendment then. Yep, thank you. All right, so any other discussion about the minutes as amended? Okay, let's have a vote then. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. We're going to jump into updates. So how about first we hear from MRB Group, then I also want to add a small update. Hello, MRB Group. We have Tracy and Michael and Scott are here. Good morning.
Hi there.
You're
Good morning.
on.
Yeah, so just a quick update about contracting. We just met a month ago, so I don't think there's a lot in terms of monitoring from Scott, but I'll hand it to him afterwards. In terms of contracting, we do have 44 fully executed contracts. So there's less than 10 left to get into full execution. So that's Jesse's really knocking it out of the park getting those done. And all but one are, at least have draft contracts, if not have submitted some partial documentation.
Thank you.
Scott, do you have anything on monitoring?
I would just add that, the end of the first quarter was last Friday, so we started to receive a few vouchers and reports in over the weekend. So the next couple weeks we'll be busy with reviewing and submitting for payment, and then we'll put it all together in a report for you for next month.
Excellent. Any questions or comments for MRB Group? That's great. I've been reporting, and it still sounds like it's true. Everything's progressing nicely. We're still in the early stages, but real things are happening. Great. Thank you. My update has to do with the Strategic Tourism Planning Board and funding for the arts. As I'm sure you all remember, in our first round of recommendations and awards, we didn't award anything to what would be considered an arts organization, and we heard from the public about that. And so that conversation has gone over to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, who makes recommendations about our hotel tax revenue. And they are in the process of opening up another round of funding to arts and cultural organizations, what's called ACOD in our language, Arts and Cultural Organizational Development. They're calling it a extended, I think, or expanded ACOD program. So they're still working out the details, but I'm bringing it up here because it is relevant to what we're going to be talking about soon, and to let you know that there is another pot of money and another advisory board that is working on making a recommendation to the full legislature about funding some arts organizations with additional money.
Would that be for this year only?
Yeah, one time, yeah. Deborah.
So not to complicate things unnecessarily, but that's what we do. Is it correct that that expanded pot of funding is money that we gave them over and above? What?
Where's the money coming from?
Where's the money? Is it ARPA or is it?
No, it's going to be from their budget surplus. 2022 hotel tax revenues came in way over what they budgeted. So I think that's fair to say, right? Norma, does that feel right to you?
Yeah, and in their memo, they acknowledged the fact that they received ARPA funds and recognized that did help them to build the increase in their fund balance. So they're using fund balance dollars to create this new grant program. I think that was just to speak to what I think you were getting at. Yes, they received ARPA funds. They recognize that some of their surplus is due to that, and they are using those funds too.
Well, I know that there's been some concern that they got those ARPA funds because we were worried that their funding was going to be way low.
So that is a really big and interesting topic. I think it's beyond this committee, though. It's not
Okay.
a committee business. Good. Randy.
I'd just like to make the comment, but also in a prior meeting, they announced the awards they already provided with the increased revenue they had, and there were quite a few arts programs in that. I don't know if that matters or not, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, To the best of my knowledge, that was about 30,000 more than they had originally budgeted. This would likely be a whole order of magnitude beyond that. You're welcome. Any other comments about that subject before we move on? All right. Okay, well, now we're getting into the tofu of the meeting. Consideration of redistribution of unused community recovery fund money. So I had sent out a memo. I ran it by the committee members a few weeks ago, and then I included it in the agenda packet. And in it, I tried to lay out, try to organize, and give as much relevant information as I could about all the options that I could envision of how we might do this. And I also asked each one of you, if there's some option that I haven't gotten, that I haven't thought of, please let me know so we can get it into the packet. And nobody did. It doesn't mean there's not more options, but at this time, nobody has identified another one. So unless someone asks me not to, I'm going to take a few minutes to run through the options as I see them. It's been in the packet, so it's for a week, so the public has seen it, but I just think it's worthwhile kind of running through briefly what we might do, and then we will actually work on what we're going to do. Is that acceptable? Okay. Take your silence as a yes. I had written down first question, but you know what? Since then, I thought of a firster question, which was brought up today. I think the very first question we have to decide is, will we accept any new applications? So let's not do that quite yet, but I think we just need to be clear whether we are or we aren't. And then another question that I believe we need to answer before we dive into any other options is, are we going to allow applicants who have already received partial funding to be considered for more money or not? I think that's kind of a decision point that we need to decide before we get down the options. There might be other ways to think of it, but that was how I organized it. And then after we answer those questions, there's a whole bunch of options. I put numbers on them, but I just wanted to assure you that that is not a priority list. Deborah asked me to put numbers on them so we could refer to them easier. And so I just saying. Option 1, continue down the prioritized list in order. So that was something that the last version of this committee had discussed, and we can do that or not. And what it would mean is, as I said in the memo, literally just going down to the next one that we had ranked who didn't receive funding. And the only real glitch in that one might be the minimum maximum request. And just let me state this again for anyone who might be listening, for the public. Each applicant said, this is the minimum I would accept, this is the maximum I would accept. So there are situations when the minimum is so large that we wouldn't have enough money to fund it. So that complicates each one of our choices, and we'll work through it however we decide to. But I just wanted to be clear what I meant by minimum and maximum. So that's one option, is just continue down the list in the order that we had already prioritized it. Another option is to take all the lists that had made the cutoff, and I'll talk about the cutoff in a minute, and decide which of those we want to fund and which we don't. And what we did was, in the first round, we did a two-step process. We eliminated, we voted yes or no on everything. We drew a line that said, okay, these ones got enough yeses to still be in the running. And that list of those that were still in the running is approximately 80 projects long. We ended up funding 53 projects. That means we have 27 left on that list. So that's another option. We can say those are the awards, those are the grants we're willing to consider, those 26 or 27. And I put that list in there so you can see what they are. Sure.
So in the committee, I think there were 6 people in that committee, so
yes.
It only came forward if it was 4-2 vote, 3 threes were considered failed. Is that how that worked?
Michael, do you remember, was that the cutoff? Veronica's shaking her head. Yeah, Michael's
Yes,
shaking his head.
that's correct.
But we started, obviously, the ones that got 5 votes were at the top, and then the 4s, and then the 3s, yeah.
It was, we picked a formula. There are many formulas one could pick, which is another issue. Okay, thank you. Option 3 is to Oh, before we go on, for either of those first two options that I laid out, there's another thing we have to consider if we decide to go one of those. We had 2 grants that got lost between being sent and being received. And the last year's committee did consider them. However, they were not given equal consideration in that they didn't make it into the first round of voting. We did the best we could. There's no other way we could have done it, in my opinion. But they did not exactly receive the same weight that the other ones did. So if people feel like they need, because of that, they need to be thrown into the option 1 or the option 2 group, that is a decision we have to make. Deborah.
But in fairness, we did give them each 2 votes. One, whether or not, we should have included them in the group because it wasn't their fault that it got lost. But then, and I think what we decided was in both cases, yes, we should consider them. But then as a group, we voted on whether or not we thought they ranked with the applications that we wanted to fund, and we voted no.
That is correct. And I think we did the fairest thing we could given those circumstances. But however, the fact is they weren't exactly treated as everyone else. So we will decide whether that matters or not. Okay, option 3. That we look at all 234 applications and we do another weighted voting. And that is an option. But I did point out a little lower down that there's an implication here that no matter what option we choose, these committee members are going to read all the applications. And if we go to the biggest list, that's roughly 2,000 pages of material. So everyone should just keep that in mind as we weigh these options. Option 4 is a whole new one that we didn't really consider at all before. And it's basically, what do they call it in the state and Congress? It's member items, that's right. It's kind of like that. That's the equivalent to that. So each legislator would be given a certain amount of money to award as they see fit, and we just make all that work. And if we do that, we have to decide if it's just this committee voting or if it's the whole legislature voting. So those were the options that I had come up with. Before we dive into which one we want to do, any questions about the details, any that I missed or other options, Veronica?
A very minor question. I recall there was some sort of universal minimum award amount that we wouldn't give anyone less than that unless it was 0, and I forgot what that was. Can someone remind me?
It's 10,000.
Okay, great. So for instance, one of the things in here has a minimum listed of 2,500, but should we consider we would not actually award them less than 10,000 unless it was 0? Is that right?
Michael, do you want to speak to that a little more?
Or I guess, let me rephrase the question. Is it true that we are not making any awards higher than 0 but less than $10,000 to anyone at all?
There was one award in the first round that was $6,000. So the committee does have that option.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. So the answer is that we set it up a certain way, but we bent the rules a little bit. Is that?
There are rules, we can break them.
I mean, there's some truth to that, right? Randy.
In the first round, MRB did a scoring table. And I misplaced the hard copy. I know I had one, but was that the primary tool you used, the scoring down to?
I would say it was not the primary tool. It was one of many tools. Does that sound fair?
I was just curious.
Yeah. And that ranking still exists. It's on the website, if I'm not mistaken. If not, we can definitely get you copies. Deborah.
Yeah, if I can address that, and then I have a suggestion for a process. Because there was a big category of 25 points, I think, that was basically legislative discretion. What sorts of needs did we see as being the ones that we wanted to address? And so the initial scoring that MRB did would end up with a total that would vary considerably based on what we as legislators thought were the needs that we wanted to meet. So that's how the scoring played out. But I was going to suggest that, that maybe the easiest way to deal with all these options is to try to eliminate the ones we can agree we don't want to use. And that would limit our discussion and contention to one or two, or just two, say.
Okay,
That makes sense to me.
so we're going to decide what to eliminate?
Well,
So what I was going to suggest is that we just go around the room and just start to hear if people have a preference for certain options, just to see where we are. But I mean, we could do that way. You'd be going around the room saying, which one do you want to eliminate?
well, I mean, some of them seem, to me at least, to be totally impractical. And also, I understand that we've got new people on the committee, and they may want to engage in weighted voting of the full prioritized list, but to reassess every single application.
Before you talk against that one, let's hear what people have to say. Veronica?
Should we answer the first question and the first question before we do that?
Oh, yeah, we do have to answer. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. Okay, yeah, let's answer the first questions then. The first question is, will we accept new applications or not?
Let's say it again.
Will we accept new applications or not? Veronica's shaking her head no. Susan's shaking her head no. Mike, I see a lot of shakings of no. Okay, I'm going to take that. Does anybody feel like we should discuss that further?
Should we just formally vote on that so that?
Yes.
Made a reference.
Let us formally vote on it. Thank you, Deborah. Will you put it into a motion, please?
I move that we not accept new applications.
Ziegler seconds that. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so a yes vote means we're not accepting any new applications. Ready to vote? All in favor? That is unanimous. Whew. Everything should be this easy. Second, the next first question. Are those applicants who already received partial funding to be excluded from further allocations or not? That's a tough question.
Yes.
Okay, I'll move, I'll
Sure.
move that we will not consider additional funding to people who've already been awarded a grant.
Deborah moves that. Travis seconds that. Discussion. Veronica.
I support that, but I wonder, I don't have a preference, should we treat specifically the Chamber of Commerce differently? Because the award it got was sort of a, like, here's the leftover money. I don't know if we should.
Well, that's a good point.
I'm not sure I understand that.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the County Chamber of Commerce was the last one on the list that actually got funding. And I think its application had like 3 separate projects, and it seemed or affirmed, maybe Jennifer Tavares affirmed that they were very flexible in the amount of money that they could use. And so, because our desired awards didn't necessarily add up to exactly 6,500,000, blah, 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 blah. There was some particular dollar amount left, looks like 21,451, and I think we asked them, could you use this somewhat random amount of money? And they said yes. But I'm bringing this up because that decision to award them that amount as opposed to more feels like it was made differently than the decision to award all the previous applications their particular amount instead of more. The other partial fundings were made from the merged spreadsheet decisions, and that was from that plus, well, this is just what we have left.
So that sounds right. Pause for a moment. Tracy, I just want to check with you. That all sounds correct. Is there any other information to add?
Nope, that's spot on.
Spot on. Okay, very good. A+. Okay, so
So I can amend my motion to say that with the exception of the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce, we will not be awarding additional funds to grantees who had already received funds.
okay,
We may not consider, not necessarily award. We may not, we will consider them, and we aren't going to give them a, right? It's not a decision has been made to give them money, it's just we will consider.
right. I think you intended that.
Yeah.
Yep. I think Travis, do you second that? Is that good with you? Is that friendly?
Well, in the first question, it says they may exclude it. So now we're saying we may not consider it, or we...
No, no, they're not, they are, it's not a new application. It's just that,
I'm just saying, in the first question, agenda, says applicants who are willing to see partial funding to be excluded from further allocations. So your motion is that they may be considered, or may not considered?
no, my motion was that they would be excluded except for the Chamber of Commerce. Okay.
Work for everybody? Any other discussion about that exemption? I just wanted to ask, is there any, I assume we can manage this, but is there any contract process issues? Like, we already have a contract with them. Will we just amend it if we needed to? Is that?
Yeah, that contract isn't signed yet. It's not fully executed, so we can still make some adjustments if needed.
Joan?
And as I expressed when we did the earlier review of that application, there was a portion that was in the application that was not part of what got funded for the microenterprise program. And I'd be concerned if that's lumped in and treated like the others, because we need to make sure that's coordinated with the microenterprise project that the county is funding. Sorry.
No, don't be
I don't know how
sorry.
to say that any
I'm
better.
just trying to absorb
I didn't
it.
expect the questions.
Yeah. So your concern is that if,
I'm not saying whether to exclude them
Yeah.
or not. I don't want to blanket say we'd just amend that contract, because I think we would have, if the microenterprise portion is funded, our department would like to see careful language about how that's coordinated with the other microenterprise grant funds.
And aren't there some additional concerns about monitoring? Because if we're passing ARPA funds through the chamber to an ultimate recipient, then we're on the hook if the ultimate recipient somehow or another doesn't meet the ARPA restrictions. Is that not the case?
That you'd have to ask MRB. That I don't know.
Yeah, but we have other contracts that are pass-throughs to other recipients and have that set up as so that they're verifying the eligibility of those recipients.
And they're using funds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
okay, so the motion on the floor is to not allow, Trina, can you read it back to us?
Okay, this is amended. With the exception of the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce, the committee will not consider funding to those already awarded grant funding.
Additional funding.
Yes.
Okay, so a yes vote means we're not refunding funding once again anybody with the exception of the Chamber of Commerce. That's a yes vote. I think we're all yeses, but I just want to make sure. I mean, we were leaning towards yes.
Can I just propose an amendment to add in language, like, with the exception of the Chamber of Commerce, because their original award was merely the remainder of the amount?
Sure.
Sorry, I know. I don't want people to be like, why are they special?
That's a good, I like that too.
Sure.
You got some wording out of that? Okay. I think you capture the spirit. All right. Any other discussion about this motion? So yes vote means we're agreeing that we're not going to allow anybody to be funded again, except. Okay, ready to vote then? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. All right. Now we're up to what to do. I'm gonna
The lost grants.
What's that?
The lost grants.
Those don't apply to each one, so those only apply to option 1 or 2. So let's find out which option we're going with. But don't let me forget it. Thank you. So I'm going to stick with my thought from the beginning, which is we're just going to go around, and if you have a preference for an option, say so. If you're maybe open to 2 different ones, say that. If you're not really sure yet, you want to hear the discussion, say that. This is not a vote yet. This is just trying to gauge where we're at. So how about we start with Veronica, and we'll work our way around the room. Veronica, do you have an option, preference for one of these options?
Definitely either option 1 or option 2.
Randy?
I don't have so I have a question first.
Sure.
So on the weighted voting of full prioritized list, what, was that the 80 you originally selected?
Correct, that would be the 80.
Okay, I don't remember what was on that list.
Well, it's in the packet. We can come back to you if you want to take a few minutes, Randy. If you look at packet page 11, those are the 26 projects that would still be on the table. So how about we come back to you? Would that work?
Sounds good.
Good. Susan?
I like option 1 and option 2. I'm intrigued by option 4, worth discussing.
Okay, hang on a sec. Susan, 1 or 2? And intrigued by 4. All right, Mike Sigler.
I like the idea of not going through every single one again. So I would stick with the ranking. But I would like to open it up to those people that were ranked to lower their minimum allowances, which probably isn't listed here.
Okay,
If
so
that makes any sense to you.
well, let me see if I got it. So you're on options 1 or 2, but you would also like to allow them to lower their minimum ask.
I figure it this way. When you asked for that money, we were working with $6.5 million. Now we're not. And you can argue that that doesn't matter, although, I don't know, the parameters have changed. And I think we could adjust our thinking because those parameters have changed. I'm not firm on that. But
Fair enough.
other people like that idea. I would like to put that out there.
Let's leave it out there for now, because we can't decide that yet anyway.
I understand.
Very good. So you're 1 or 2 is what you're saying for now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Travis?
I am for 1 or 2, and I would support the idea of seeing if people wanted to lower their minimum.
Okay. Deborah?
Yeah, I'm with 1 or 2.
Okay. I'm going to say, 1 or 2 is fine. I like 4, but it's not happening, so I'm not worried about it. So I'll just stay with 1 or 2 also myself. Randy?
I don't like 4 either, so pass on that one. My only concern is that as a legislature that didn't get a chance to do this the first time, I would have pushed for a few that aren't on this list to come forward. So because I'm very focused on Enfield, as you know, and there's only 1 on here, and I'm not sure that one's going to have a good run at it. So that's as a group. So I would modify number 3 that a legislature could request some to come forward. I'm not saying all of them, but some that didn't make the 80.
So options 1 or 2 with another rule that we can also pull in new ones.
Correct.
Okay, before I let number 4 go, I just have to state my reasons. I just feel like it would have avoided much of the issues that we had internally, including what Randy just identified, which was the committee members didn't really get a good, or really any say in what was going to be making the list. But, okay, now that I've said that, I'm letting it go. All right.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
My problem with number 4 is that you're going to end up with people who are allocating their piece to something where their piece is inadequate to meet the needs of the grant applicant. That's my only concern with number 4. What happens if, if I decide to allocate my 36,000 or my 70, whatever it is, to something whose minimum is 125, and if I'm the only person that is allocated that, what do you do with my piece? I just think it's unworkable. I mean, it's democratic with a small d, but it's unworkable.
Right.
Well, if you're suggesting we reopen the fund balance to make that amount more.
I didn't hear her
That's a
say
much
that.
larger discussion.
I didn't
Well,
hear
I
her
can
say
just take you downstairs and club you over the head, Mike.
I second that.
that. Violate our ethics policy.
We've got three, yeah.
All right, so we are only looking at options 1 or 2, but there's still some particulars within those options that we need to decide. I think it'd be worthwhile. Let me give this a try. Maybe it won't work, but I'd like to go around again and saying, now that we're down to 1 or 2, do you have a preference for 1 or 2? See where that gets us. To start on you, Deborah, and go the other way.
Well, I mean, my preference personally was just option 1.
Okay.
Because as a general rule, we don't, every year that a committee changes, go back and rewrite history. On the other hand, this is kind of a one-off situation. And I guess what's left on the full prioritized list is how many? I'm trying to,
26?
26. It's
Yeah.
26. Could be
Okay.
27 with the chamber.
So I guess I would be in favor of option 2. I think that would be fair to everyone who felt that they got left out of the process last year. And in the interests of inclusion, I might be in favor of having every legislator vote and have their input weighed in so that we would have a feeling that at least as to this last 500 and however many thousands of dollars we have, everyone's had a direct say in how that money's used.
Thank you. So right now, we're going around and we're saying whether you have a preference for 1 or 2, and if you don't, that's fine too. Travis?
So 2 is the 26, right?
Correct.
So I'm with 2.
Okay. Mike? Wow. Susan?
2.
Wow, here we go. Randy?
I'm fine with 2 with my earlier comment.
Yes, we'll get to that question too. Very good. Randy, 2. Veronica?
I don't really have a preference other than for more harmony in the legislature, so I guess 2.
2 is the more harmonious, maybe
On
not
this
the,
particular issue.
maybe not the most harmonious. Okay, 2. So I'll go with 2 also. That was really easy. We're doing option 2. We'll have some more questions to work through. Yeah, so one of them is committee only, or do all the legislators get to vote? Deborah already said that she would like everyone to vote. So give me a sec, because I'm trying to keep track of all this. Okay, so that is the next question. I don't understand the question. Veronica? Pass if you need more time.
I guess whatever other people like.
No preference.
No, yes, no preference on this.
Andy?
So this is where you took the 80 and you all kind of did your own scoring on it, and you put your dollar amounts in and all that stuff. I did that, by the way.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, yeah, I'm fine with that, again, with my second
Yeah.
comment.
So is this everybody or committee?
I'm fine with everybody, yeah.
Okay. Susan?
I think the full legislature.
Legislature, all right. Everybody. Mike?
While I understand the harmony argument, I think there's a reason you have committees. So I would say the committee.
Travis?
So whatever we decide, the full legislature gets a vote anyways, right?
It's true.
I would say that it would be good to be able to say to the full body, this is what we prioritized. They're going to vote anyway, but at least there's a starting point. And maybe some folks won't necessarily want to go through the whole exercise again and trust the committee this time. Some won't. So I would say we should come up with a recommended list. It may allow for an opportunity for some of the ones that Randy wanted to pull up to kind of be seen. as a recommendation from from this group. So I would say this group, full body is going to end up voting on it anyways.
I changed my mind. I agree with what Travis said.
I think I didn't understand, so, I mean, because my assumption is that the full legislature is going to have to vote anyway, but I think it would bring about harmony if we all are in agreement. We've had a chance to have some, perhaps we could all be,
Committee,
yeah.
and Randy also committee.
And I think it was a good point Travis said. What if some people not on the committee are like, I don't want to do this committee work?
Well, they don't have to. I mean, okay. Well, but my suggestion is simply you put it out there for everyone on the legislature who wants to participate. You know, my feeling is if somebody doesn't want to participate, then I don't want to hear their objections to what the recommendations are. I just
but we
want to
will.
open the opportunity up to everyone so that everyone can feel that their voice has been heard. Because this has been so freaking contentious.
So can I ask a question? So is it possible that anybody who wants to participate can participate now? And then we could take that information to the full body versus?
Well, yeah, that's what we would do.
Okay.
Yes, we can do that.
So if we did that, I would be okay. Either this body do it and make a recommendation, or if the folks from the full legislature want to participate now, that they do that, and then we put everything together and say, this is what we came up with.
Yeah.
And then that's it. Not, this is what we came up with, and then we do all the shenanigans all over again.
And the shenanigans are what I'm trying to avoid.
See shenanigans on this list here.
Okay, let me see if I can sort a few things out here. First of all, I want to remind people, I want to explain why first time through, the committee made its recommendations. Nobody not on the committee got a vote, and nobody that wasn't on the committee had a chance to change anything. Not one piece of information got changed, and that caused a lot of the frustration among the other legislators. They feel like they didn't get a vote, a voice, and that is the truth. They really had no meaningful influence on the outcome. So that would be the reason for opening it up to everybody. I think with the way we operate, the way committees operate here, eventually it is the committee. We do have to make a recommendation to the full legislature, and the shenanigans have to happen. Anyone's allowed to vote on things and debate them and amend them. So there's no way to stop that. So that's the thinking behind for me, which way we go here. Are we, from the beginning, allowing everyone else to have a voice so that later on nobody can say, I didn't have any say in this? Or are we saying, no, it's the work of a committee and that's going to be our recommendation?
Can I just say, though,
Yeah.
I understand that's how stuff usually works, but generally, the shenanigans are not as granular. This is not, well, we're making a decision about policy. This is, we're taking X dollars and cents, and we're dividing them up among these people in these exact amounts. I mean, when you get down to that level of granularity, that's where the shenanigans get unmanageable, in my opinion, which is why I really want y'all to consider just putting that form out there and letting every one of our colleagues who wants to participate be part of the process, so that we can eliminate the shenanigans, or at least minimize them. That process would allow Randy and any other legislator who really wants to push for something particular to have their voice heard initially.
Okay, so obviously this is a complex decision, and I heard a couple of different shifts and variations. So I think it'd be worthwhile to try again after all that discussion to see where people are at with the question, do we allow, is it just the committee to voting, or is it the full legislature? So let's try it again. Travis?
I'm okay with the full legislature, as long as it's done in between now and whenever, and that information is shared back out to the full legislature.
So the full legislature would weigh in, the committee makes its final choice.
That's good.
Mike?
I was going to do it in reverse, but yeah, that works for me.
Okay. Susan?
Sounds good, yep. Agree.
Andy, thumbs up.
That's fine with me. I just want to note, though, in practice, like when the committee did this the first time, we all filled out the forms, MRB compiled them, gave us a spreadsheet, and I think we just did what it said. Like, the committee had a chance to change it, but we didn't, and so that will be the same again, but I'm guessing that in this case, I guess the committee makes the final choice, but I would expect that what it'll be is we won't have any more meaningful input. We'll just be the ones looking at it going, yep. I'm still fine with either.
Either. Deborah?
All of us.
The full legislature. Okay, so, wow, we basically have it then. We have consensus as far as I see it. So before we go further with that, I'd like to check with MRB to make sure that we're not setting up some weird obstacle that we can't overcome in terms of administration. Michael?
Yeah, process-wise, I think we're set, right? I mean, we have a system where we have the spreadsheets and we combine them. Just for clarity's sake, I would assume, but I want to ask, that we would be using the same prioritization that we did in the first round, which means to say we floated to the top the applications that got all the votes, right? 6 votes for some amount, right? And then all the ones that got 5, and then all the ones that got 4, right?
Only in this case,
And-
you'll start with 14.
Well, yeah, so it'd be 14, 13, something like that. And then within those categories, so at 14, it would be the one that received the highest percentage amount of the grant ask, right? That's how we did it the first time. And I'm happy to recirculate those, that methodology we used. So I just want to confirm that we would carry over that same methodology in this case.
That's a good question, and I'll just say for myself, when we got to that level, I personally decided not to make any decisions. Like, whatever formula they wanted to use was good enough for me, but other people may feel differently.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, I see nods. So,
Okay.
Michael, that felt good to you? That made sense?
Absolutely, yeah. I think just because we're doing a 14, just to prep the committee,
Please.
because we have 14 votes, it's very unlikely that we'll have a unanimous 14, all 14 legislatures pick this particular application. So it'll be a little bit further down the list. We'll probably, I can't speculate where we'll hit, but there might be just a little bit, I guess what I'm trying to say is there might be a little bit more dispersion, right, of how the votes cast out on this.
So, Michael, what I saw around the table was a belief that you're going to find the right formula based on
Okay.
the information you receive from us.
Okay,
Travis.
very good.
And just so I'm clear, we are starting with the 26, and then people do have the opportunity to move some up, or have we decided that yet?
We haven't decided that yet. We're getting there.
So at least that 26.
At least that 26.
Just point of order, I believe it's 27 if we include the chamber as had previously been voted. So yes.
Okay. Thank you. 27. Veronica.
Thank you. I guess 2 things on the chamber that might have to be presented differently to indicate that they've already gotten 21,000 or whatever it is. But Michael, I would trust you to figure that out. And I just want to name that, I guess in the first round, I did slightly object to the prioritization because I felt that within each category of this application got this many, 6 or 5 or 4 committee members wanting to fund it, that prioritizing within that by percentage of the maximum amount awarded ended up potentially unfairly deprioritizing applications with a wide range between minimum and maximum, like applications that were just more flexible on what they could take. And I still think that may be true, but I'm not worried about it. Just partially because if we're going to have 14 instead of 6 people voting, my guess, like Michael said, is that there will just be more levels of how many legislators wanted to fund something at all, and the prioritization within that just won't be as big a deal.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a fact that whatever formula is chosen will benefit some and hurts others. That's why I'm staying out of that one. There's just no way for all of us to say, I want this formula, that formula. So thank you for your flexibility. All right. Let's see if I can figure out where we are. This is good. We're working our way through the questions.
I think we're down to what to do about the lost grants.
Yes, let's do the lost grants. Thank you. So there were 2 grants, as I indicated here at the bottom of packet page 8, Dryden Fiber and Trip Hammer Arts. What would we like to do with these applications? Well, time out. Maybe the better question is this thing that a few of you brought up of, should we allow any legislator to pull in applications that are not on the list of 27? Because that would solve that problem. That would answer that Dryden problem. So this one is, I definitely want to hear what everyone says, and we're going to have to really think through the mechanics of this. I can't quite picture how it'll work yet. Randy.
The reason I think it's fair to let a legislature do this, because, again, as you mentioned, I and other legislators had no say whatsoever what came forward in the first 80, and there were some that were brought forward that scored poorly, much more poorly than ones I want to bring forward. So that's my comment. And I would agree to limit the number if that would help.
Randy, can I ask a clarifying question? Are you saying that some of the ones that ended up making the top portion of the list scored lower than ones that were left off? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
On MRB's initial scoring, which doesn't factor in the 25 points for a consensus on what needs the legislature wanted to meet.
And a good example would be the Cayuga Indian language, right, which I support, by the way, but scored very poorly.
But it didn't score poorly once we had the weighted.
Scored poorly from MRB's list. So could someone paint a picture for us about how it would actually work if we decide to go this way? What would it look like for a legislator to identify one or more other applications and pull them into the voting? How would that work? I can't picture it myself yet.
Maybe each legislature could choose one.
Okay, so
They may not be in the list.
So
They could say
26 becomes 40?
maybe.
at most, yeah. So we're just playing this out. We're not voting yet. So each legislator would identify one other application that they want pulled back into the pile. And so, yeah, so it would be up to 40 that would be voted on instead of 27. Yeah, okay.
That kind of solves your number 4 option too. At least it gives that option for people to, for whatever reason, to consider those.
Before we keep going with that, I want to go back to MRB. Do you see any process issues with this, like administrative issues?
Well, we would provide instructions to make sure that, the legislators know what they're doing for that. I mean, in essence, what you're talking about is option 4, right? Or I'm sorry, not option 4, is opening up the entire list, right, to the entire legislature. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying. Unless, but I heard someone say something like they could maybe add 1 on there.
That's right.
I was a little unclear about how exactly the committee was viewing this.
That is the first suggestion that we are discussing, like, yes, it is essentially option 3, except each legislator would only identify one to add to the list.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would see there being, we would reach out, give the legislators a timeline to provide us with one project they wanted to pull into the list. And then we would create the spreadsheet and send that out for everybody to do their voting.
That's, as long as you're limited to one, that's
One
fine.
project that's not on this 26.
If you wanted to.
If you want to.
So I just want to make sure that's potentially workable from your end. There's no major roadblocks?
If we limit it to one, I think that it's workable. Yeah, if we didn't open it up to, 15, then we're essentially just dealing with the whole list again, right?
That's right.
So, yeah, one per legislators, it certainly would work. And what we could do, so Tracy, your idea, I think, is a good one. We could go out ahead of time and say, who do you want to add to this list? Or on the spreadsheet, we just leave one line blank and say, if you have one to add to this, put the application number, the application name, and add it to that. We could do that as well.
Yeah,
That would just save one step.
Except
But then not
that doesn't allow everyone on the legislature to vote on the ones that people add.
I like
So
Tracy's
that does
idea.
not work.
I also like Tracy's idea.
Okay.
Okay, so we're still discussing. We haven't decided. We're just examining all the angles here. I have Norma and then I have Veronica.
Oh,
Go ahead, Norma.
I'm not on the committee, so,
Yes,
no,
yes,
so
you
if you're opening it up to the entire legislature, you've made a decision that you're not going to review the previously funded projects. How do you prevent that from happening if you're opening? So are you going to, you're not going to allow, is that going to work across the entire legislature? I guess that's my question. Because if we're opening it up for everybody to add one, and we've funded some of these other ones, and somebody really wanted to give more funding to one of the
Only
projects.
add one that hasn't been funded.
Okay, this committee chose that. Everybody didn't.
This committee is setting a process that
Okay.
everyone can participate.
Okay.
I mean, Norma's pointing out something real, that somebody might not, it still might not meet every single desire of every legislator. I'm not sure we can accomplish that feat. Veronica?
So I think what we would tell people if they wanted to add something that already funded is just like, too bad, we voted that we will not be doing that.
You give them a list to choose from that doesn't
Yeah.
include the things that have been funded.
Right, so can I lay out how I think this is going to work, and just interrupt me if I'm wrong, is someone from MRB Group would or someone would email out being like, here's the process, there's going to be, and this first part is happening out of committee meeting, but by email, be like, from this date first date in the future to second date in the future, you are going to have to do your spreadsheet prioritization, same rules as last time, between, what's wrong?
The first thing is that you add, and then you do what you're talking about.
Right.
I know, I'm getting to that, but shouldn't we communicate to people what is going to happen after they add a thing so that they know what's going on? Sure. Yeah. So be like,
That process, right?
yeah. So the first step, and we should communicate the second step before doing the first step, but the first step is you have until this day to select, you're going to be allocating the $500,000 among a list of applications that will definitely include these 27 applications and perhaps some more. So sometime before this deadline, if you personally would like to add one more application to consideration from this list of stuff that wasn't in the original 80, including the Dryden Fiber and Trip Hammer Arts, right? Then you can select your one, tell Michael or whoever's running this, and maybe we should also tell people if you yourself are not going to be allocating any of the $500,000 to that one you select, don't add it into the list.
Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
You'd think, but it's the kind of thing that I might not think of and be like, oh, I want to just add an extra thing for consideration because I like it, even if, yeah.
So Veronica, I think I understood and agree with everything you said, and I will, here's what I will do when we get through all this. I'm going to write up where we're going, what we decided today, and make sure all the legislators get it. But before I send that out, I'll send it to you and make sure I got it right. Fair enough? And then you can add
To all of us,
ideas.
yeah.
Good? Okay.
Can I add one wrinkle?
Sure, keep wrinkling, yep.
If
Not done
we, I know that one thing that we asked Joan to do the first time around was alert us to any projects that we might want to consider that would require a seeker. So I think we're going to, when we end up with the new list, we are going to have to get that input again so people understand that if we choose something as a group, we're going to have to wait on the seeker process. Are there any other ones that?
Yes.
There were several that were not considered that I didn't see any reason raising, but I have the list. It's
Okay.
already, those determinations have been made. When you say subject to a seeker process, I think we've done the preliminary work on maybe almost all the ones that required a seeker that would require a seeker determination. Twofold. One, so that for the record, we did what we were supposed to do legally, which was to consider the environmental impacts as the county.
Right.
But two, some of them just require a resolution concurring with an environmental review that's been done previously. So there wouldn't be a big process necessarily.
So there aren't any other ones that had the kind of issue that Second Wind had?
Oh, there are.
Okay, so we could only award money provisionally.
Can't award money, period.
Right.
So the
We can
environmental.
set money aside, okay.
Yeah.
So are
Sorry, I'm
there
just
any
being
of
very-
those left
thank you.
out there?
Yes.
Okay, so we need to alert our colleagues to that as part of this process. That's all I'm saying.
Joan, do you want to add a little more?
I hate to say that seeker adds a process. It doesn't always. Some of the environmental reviews have been completed by our office, and we're ready to submit the resolution and paperwork right away. I'm not sure there are any that would need to be a coordinated review. There was one where it was suggested we do a coordinated review, and that's not for me to determine, that's for somebody else than me to determine. I'm trying not to be too fuzzy, but I don't think the fact that there would need to be an environmental review should keep a project from being considered or voted on at the committee level. That would be consistent with what was done before.
Good, so I will also try to include.
So when the list comes out, I'd rather wait till the list comes out and then identify potential need for environmental review. Yes, rather than doing it now and scaring people off of projects that
Okay.
they don't need to be scared of.
Sharing. I will, however, put in this packet of instructions and explanation that if there's a seeker attached to it, there could be extra steps involved, and we can't, at this moment, we can't answer every single one of those questions. Just to remind people, they know it already. Good? All right. I think we had one, if I'm reading this right, I think we had one more big question to answer, which is, do we allow people to change their minimums? Oh, before we jump there, hang on one sec. Let me pull. So it seems like we're moving towards this idea of everyone gets to add one if they want, and I'm on board with that. My only thing that I want to remind people or alert people is that there's an implication there that every legislator then has faithfully and equitably reviewed every application in deciding which one they wanted to pull out and put into the higher level. So just be ready to respond to that if somebody says to you, how is that fair? Did you really review all applications? That is kind of what you're suggesting, that you weighed everything equally. Any
That's our
reaction?
job, right?
Yeah, that is. I mean, any other reactions to that? Okay. So, yes, another question then we have to answer is, do we change the minimum? And then, Mike, you also had something you wanted to throw in.
I had something after.
After that? Okay. So that is the next question, and maybe one of the last ones. One or more people brought up the idea that they would like the applicants to be able to modify their application to say what their new minimum is. Who would like to speak to that? Randy?
I agree with that because we have a lot less money to give out.
How about MRB? Do you have any reactions to that?
I think the order, just so we understand, the order of operations would be legislators would ask us to add the application, right? An application. So we'd have potentially 14 more, right?
Correct.
And then it would be those that would be, or any of the 27 plus the 14 that could then modify their minimum.
Yep.
We're not going to go out to everybody again, right?
No.
Just the ones that are still in consideration, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that's fine.
Start calling them the top 40. It's going to stick.
Oh, nice, Dan.
What's that? Casey Kasem. All right. Okay, so MRB said process-wise, that's not an issue. I've heard Randy and Deborah both say they like the idea of allowing new minimums. Travis is liking that. Susan's fine with that. Veronica, talk.
I guess I don't quite get what you see the value of this would be. My memory is that a lot of the minimums were like constrained by the project itself. Like maybe, I don't know, you can't install half a sidewalk or whatever it is. But
just
so I guess can someone
just in
comment on that?
case, just in case they could do it, with less, just in case they've gotten alternative funding lined up since they made their application how many months ago?
Right, as somebody who probably submits 10, 15 grants a year, you know what the minimum is on the grant, you know what the maximum is, so this is what you apply for. You don't, if somebody was to reach out later on and say to you, hey, listen, this is what we have left, can you do something with this? You can alter your programming a little bit. Like Deb said, you may have found some funding. So in most people, their minimum is still not really exactly, you always ask for more than what you need. So if you ask for $250,000, that's your minimum, your maximum is $350,000, you probably could get away with $165,000 or $150,000 because you always ask, or your minimum is always more than what you need because you know you're probably not going to get what you asked for. So people looking at $6.5 million, $7 million, they write out their grant. Now they know there's $510,000. People may say, yeah, I could do 25 instead of 40. So I do think a lot of people may change their minimum.
That's helpful, thank you. But then how does that square with what we agreed earlier, which is that we are not soliciting additional information?
We're not considering unsolicited additional
Right.
information. We are asking questions.
I guess this seems like it kind of opens up to every applicant to submit a modified applicant. You're saying no, but if you have a new minimum, wouldn't you have to justify it? Am I missing something basic about
The
this?
top 40, the 40 that everybody, if it ends up being 40, the 26 to 40 that are chosen, something will go out asking them to, if they could do with less, to submit what that is. I don't necessarily think we're asking people to give us a whole new application. So if I just use Cuba, for example, if they say, listen, we could do it for $210,000, that would be our minimum. I don't think we're asking for a new application. We just want a new minimum. And it is solicited, so we're asking them.
So I will go along with the will of the group, but I did just want to say I'm a little uncomfortable with this part of it. We were really clear in the first round that you cannot change your application. And in my mind, the reason for that was we don't want people competing against each other and trying to game the system a little bit, trying to figure out our strategy. So I'm a little uncomfortable with it, but I'll go along with it if that's what we're doing.
One of my reasons for it is because what if there is one that we really like it, say it's $300,000, right? And you just eliminate a bunch of people. And that's why I think another minimum offers a few more people opportunity. So that's.
I mean, my answer to that, Randy, is I would say to them, why did you ask for 300,000 if you, whatever you said, number you said, if that's not really the number? Why don't you give us the real number? That's what I would say to them. But I also understand reality that you do have to game the system a little bit. I just, now that we're the system, I don't want to be gamed.
Yeah, it's like never trust anyone over 30. That ship sailed.
Hey, Mike, I don't think you have weighed in on this question.
I think it's a brilliant idea, really probably the finest idea that's come out today. So,
Wow.
like I said, if I threw it out there. I think if the committee likes it, I like it. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I'm even looking at things that got asked for a lot of money, like Stewart Park is on here still. And I mean, they got like $500,000 from the state or something recently. I can't imagine they still need $100,000, but maybe I don't know. Maybe they need 20. And that'll probably weigh into people's decision-making anyway. But I do have a question after this when it's done.
Okay, can I have a motion then to allow the top 40, I don't know if we want to be more formal than that, to modify their minimums before we all vote? Can I have that motion from somebody? Randy, actually, it was your idea, Mike. So Mike, and then Randy seconds. Further discussion. Veronica.
I would move to amend that they can also modify their maximums in light of what Mike just said.
Thoughts about that?
But no, I don't know.
Well, and that could, I would assume included in that would be like, actually, we're withdrawing our application because we already got the money from somewhere else, for instance.
Okay, so the amendment is to minimums, they can adjust their minimums and their maximums. Further discussion. Okay, so it sounds like the amendment's friendly then.
I would say that is friendly.
Okay, great. So now we're going to vote, unless there's more discussion, on, well, Katrina, if you don't mind reading it, please.
The committee, it was moved to allow the top 40 applicants to modify their minimum and maximum prior to the committee voting on considering those applications.
Prior to the legislature.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Ordering it all myself. Okay, any last discussion about that part? Have a vote then, all in favor? That is unanimous. Okay, the reluctant, we have 5.5 votes, 6.5 votes. All right. Mike Sigler, go ahead. You have something you wanted to bring up.
Well, this question is one that Dan will like and Deb does not like, so I'm hesitant to bring it up. There are some applications on like this 26, for example, are people we have contracts with already.
Yeah.
And it would just seem that while we could give them money out of this, I mean, these would really fit into an OTR for the next budget season. Like, I'm just looking for like cooperative extension 4-H. I love 4-H. I think it's one of the best things we do, right? That would be something that I would say, okay, they're looking for 144 or really less. I mean, we go down to 66. I could see us putting that in an OTR for next budget season. But I see that with a number of places. So I'm just kind of wondering how we navigate that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let me try. You're saying what?
Like, let me just go through it. Like,
sure,
so cooperative extension, Cayuga Medical Center, Family and Children's Services, Tompkins Community Action is a big one. We fund. Better Housing of Tompkins County, all ones that we, on an annual basis, I think, give some amount of money. It would just seem that these initiatives that are in here really could be kind of put into an OTR, maybe not one OTR, maybe it's 6 OTR, I don't know, however we'd want to handle it. And then they're not really in this pool, they're more in part of the one-time budget items for 2024. I don't know if that's a good idea. I'm saying that it is an idea.
Okay, before, I'm not sure it's a good idea either. Talk to me more about how it would work, though, like the mechanics of it.
You cannot commit.
Thought of this 5 minutes ago.
You can't commit the legislature to approving an OTR in the next budget cycle as part of this process. That's the problem.
The bigger problem is people put in grant applications for funding, I'm assuming, for 2023. So now you're saying to these folks, if you needed the money for 2023, you have to hold up for 2024.
Yeah.
So if 4-H was doing something for camps in 2000, I don't know what their application was, I don't remember. But if it was for 2020, it just, the timing doesn't work as
I got
such.
you. No, I understand.
Randy?
I talked about this earlier, and for me, I'm not sure it's a good idea either, but I would like to know which of these applications we could fund through our regular legislative process versus which ones we can't. So I don't know if, to me, that makes a difference, whether it's an OTR or not, but I just don't know.
And that might be the question, actually, that.
Yeah, maybe it's just okay, well, this one could be, and that could be part of when we vote on it, we go, all right, well, I can or I can't, and you would think it maybe has value in your vote or not, but at least you would know.
That's a very interesting idea. Norma, can you speak to that at all?
Think this through. So, yes, there are some of these that could be applied for through the annual budget. But when the departments or when the agencies are putting their budgets together, at least they should be looking at the priorities of their organization. It seems to me that the things that they've applied for may not be their regular operational organizational priority. These are things that, boy, if we could get the money, we would do them. So I would think, because I can't speak for them, obviously, I think that that's probably the direction they were going. And most folks are looking at it that way and knowing that the county is strapped for, really keeping things tight and not being able to raise taxes above the cap. So that's my take on it. My guess is that's probably what happened here. These are things that would be really nice to do. They just know that there isn't a lot of funding out there available. But yeah, they could come back and ask for it. But I think then as a legislature, you would be saying, how would you prioritize what you do on a regular annual basis? And is this really part of your priority?
Susan?
I just want to speak to that. That's absolutely true, because generally, in an agency or department, when you ask for an OTR, it's generally something you really desperately need, like new computers or new equipment or something like that. And then you might have an OTR that's something you wish for, but when you start planning your OTRs, that you're looking at your budget, what you're going to get, because you've already been given the amount. Right. So, and I also worry about how this would play into the voting, because if you're going to look at something and say, I think it's an interesting idea, and if we wanted to look at the OTRs, maybe it's at the end of the whole process rather than trying to figure it into the process, looking at these applications and trying to vote on it in the middle. Let it come up naturally in the OTR section, because my memory is that each department or agency has a meeting with county administration prior to the budget, and that's where we often said, no, don't ask for that as an OTR.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think that we ought to start trying to intermingle these processes. I remember our budget hearings last year. There were a few things that we agreed to give as an OTR, but then we reduced the amount that was available in this fund because, we thought that it was more properly a community recovery fund issue than a budget fund, and it just adds a level. This is going to be, I think, difficult enough without throwing in the possibility that 14 of us are going to be making decisions based on what we think should have been in an OTR rather than a grant application. I understand your reasoning, but I think if we ever want to get this process over with, we have to stop aiming for a result that's absolutely perfect from every perspective, because it ain't happening.
Okay, Mike, I think there's not enough support to advance it.
Like I said, it was more of a question than a
cool.
proposal.
Yeah, good.
And
So this-
something hopefully we can think about going forward, so.
Yeah, there was.
I think the other question that will come up is from some of the members when it's the bigger group is for those ones in particular that Mike mentioned, how come we can't open up the fund balance to make that happen? I'm serious. We heard it a little bit when we were talking about this before. So I think that is probably a question that'll come up at that point in time.
Well,
I'm not suggesting it now to committee, but it's something that's probably going to come up from the bigger group.
I think we're going to be addressing that question throughout the year, both in BCP and as part of the budget process. And I just ask that my colleagues pay attention to what's happening in the larger economy. Because honesty, I mean, the Saudis just decided this morning or over the weekend that they were going to cut their oil production. That's going to send gas prices climbing. That's going to feed the inflation bubble. That's going to impel the Fed to raise the interest rates again. That's going to tighten credit even further. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Sorry.
Yes, that is well beyond the scope of this committee. All right, so I believe, and we're not stopping us yet, but I think we've answered all the questions, and we're going to need to move to a timeline pretty soon. But before we get there, are there any other resolved corners of this process that we haven't touched on yet? Okay, so let me start talking about timeline for a moment, and then I'll open it up. We have a next meeting of this committee already scheduled for May 1st. And my gut feeling is that we can accomplish all that voting by May 1st so that we have a recommendation here at this committee a month from today, or 4 weeks from today, and vote on our final vote to accept the list or modify the list or whatever we're going to do. It's just my gut feeling that gives us enough time. So I'm just making this up right now, something like this. Instructions go out to the legislature of what we're asking to do, and they have maybe a weekish to get back to us with what other group they want to add to this. MRB is going to need a few days to pull the list together and get it sent back out again. And then we have another week or 10 days to actually do that voting on this merged spreadsheet. It comes back, and then it comes back in time for this committee to vote. Does that feel too rushed to anybody? I see Michael and Tracy. Okay, yes, I definitely want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Go.
But there's an important intermediary step in there. If we're going to have to go out to the top 40 to request their potential changes to the minimum and maximum, we can't send that until we know which ones are on that list, right? So we can't do that until we've heard back from the legislature. So I think we have at least another week in the middle of that time frame that we're going to.
Yep, thank you. Good point. So if we left approximately a week for that to also happen.
Can we push the May meeting to the middle of May?
If we can find a date to actually meet, yes.
I'm not going to be here.
Oh, I guess not.
Well,
No, you can, please, meet without me.
I mean, you will have already done your voting, so. Yeah, we potentially can, but I think we should probably do that outside the committee. We're not going to pick a date right now. Okay, so go ahead, Katrina.
When you change that meeting date, we have to keep into consideration when you want this to go to the full legislature too. Because the legislature meetings in May are the 2nd and the 16th, so.
So it'll have to go in June.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask if the committee's comfortable with this. In the next day or two, I'm going to work on this explanation/instructions. and I will include in that a proposed timeline. And I will run all of that by all of you and give you, you have to be relatively.
24 hours.
Well, a little more than that, but maybe like a 3-day turnaround or something like that, just to keep it moving. Would that be acceptable to everybody?
I mean, it would be nice if it was possible to give the explanation of what we're doing tomorrow at the legislature, instead of emailing out instructions and having 12 people send you questions and they just be going back and forth. So if we could do that tomorrow evening, is go over this with folks, that would be great, because some people need to hear it.
Thank you. I can definitely do that. And I think we need something in writing, both things. So maybe tomorrow night, I'm just making this up, tomorrow night, I'll get it 95% right, but there's going to be a few little things that we're not even thinking about at this moment, and that'll come out in the final written. Does that work? Yeah, I think so. Deborah?
Yeah, can I just say, I think that's a good idea, Travis, but I think if you could present this with a tone that this is the process that this committee has set. We're not opening up the process for larger input. The larger input is going to be substantive, which is filling out their weighted ratings forms. Because otherwise, I can just imagine that we're going to have people saying, oh, I think you should do this, let's do that, I don't agree. No.
Thank you. I agree. I think I can explain this, and we did decide that they could modify if they can get 8 votes, but that's not going to happen. So. Norma.
I'm afraid to ask questions. So if the folks are changing from minimum to maximum, I get, maybe this is for Mike and Tracy, are they going to, we have to have some explanation of what they are not going to accomplish from what was originally in their application, if they're going to drop it, or?
Yeah, we can ask for just a justification of why the change. To someone else's point, it might be that they've received other funding in the meantime, or whatever the case is. So we'll just ask for justification and include that with the information.
Okay.
That might discourage changes.
Yeah, if they have to explain.
So like a small narrative to accompany their change, is that what we had in mind?
Yeah,
Yes.
just like one sentence.
Yeah. We'll need that if an applicant is adjusting, for example, their minimum by adjusting their project, right? You know, if they said originally we're going to do this and it's going to cost 100,000, but we're only going to do half of that, so our minimum drops to 50. You know, we would need to know that so that we can do that during the contracting process. And obviously, you would want to be aware of that as well.
So we didn't ask this explicitly. I want to make sure from MRB Group that you are comfortable handling that part of the process of reaching out to these top 40s and letting them know what their new option is.
Yep. I mean, we'll have a very tight turnaround, and we'll tell them, you know, if we don't hear back from you, then there's no amendment, right? It's an option within a very specific time period, and this is how you respond if you want to exercise that option.
I feel pretty good about everything that just happened today. I feel like we did answer all the questions we needed to, and everyone seems, you know, mostly on board with all of it, so that's good. Are there any other details that we need to talk about today? Okay, so again, the next step is we are going to talk about it tomorrow night's meeting. I'm going to write something up in the next day or two. I'll run it by all of you for extra comments to make sure I got it right. And our goal is to, at least our goal right now, is to try to get all this work done before May 1st. And if we end up having to reschedule, we will. But let's give it a shot, see if we can make it happen that quickly. Acceptable? Good? Yep. Any last thoughts for today? Thank you, everybody. Everyone's getting along very well. This was, I think it was part of my block set when I was a kid. I just found it recently, so this is my committee gavel. So if there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned.